Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and today I have a special guest with us. I have Catherine. And today we are actually going to be talking about two books that one she was the author, and then the other one she was co-author, right? Is that the pronunciation?
That works.
Okay, perfect. Co-authored. And yeah, so Catherine, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, Heidi, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be with you today.
I'm so excited to get to talk about this because I'm a writer and I have two books that I want to publish, and they're in my heart to write. Just have to find the right time to
Absolutely
actually write them. So to me, it's such an honor that I get to interview authors, and especially books that have to do with immigration.
Yeah.
So why don't we do a little introduction?
Okay.
If you can introduce the audience who you are, what you do, and then from there we can talk about your first book, Fearing Bravely. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like you said, my name is Catherine McNeil. I live in the far western suburbs of Chicago. I have 3 teenagers, so that keeps me busy enough. Our family has a huge garden. To give you some kind of a ballpark there, we have about 180 tomato plants alone this year.
Wow.
And so we sell vegetables off of our porch to our neighbors, which is just a really cool way to get to know people. I'll be in town and people will be like, "Oh, you're a vegetable lady."
That's funny.
But professionally, I'm a writer and an author, an editor and a speaker, and so I'm kind of a word person, and I try to use my words prophetically, if that's an okay way to say it, to try to remind us of the things that we know but we've forgotten, or the things that we don't have words for, and to challenge us to really seek after God and to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly. I'm also an MDiv student, and I work part-time as a hospital chaplain.
Wow, you have a lot going on, man.
I do.
Whoa.
It's true.
Oh my goodness.
I'm a jack of all trades, master of none.
And you mentioned briefly about wanting to challenge people. And I will say I was challenged when I was reading your book, The Fearing Bravely, because you went deep into like who is our neighbor? What does it mean to love our neighbor? And it got me thinking, like, am I loving my neighbors properly?
Yeah.
Or am I also just loving just those around me who I'm comfortable with, So
Right.
yeah, so let's get into your book, Fearing Bravely. When did you know that you wanted to share this message, and why is it important?
Oh, wow, that's such a good question. The subtitle for Fearing Bravely is Risking Love for Our Neighbors, Strangers, and Enemies. And I think, oh man, I got the idea for this book in 2019 and I wrote it in 2020 when everyone was extremely afraid. And I really wanted it to be titled Fearing Bravely because I'm talking about how Jesus is empowering us not to be known for our fear, which leads to violence and self-protective measures that just disintegrate community, but to be known for our love. But that doesn't mean we're not afraid. It just means that we're not letting fear rule us. And so I really thought carefully about the title, that we are risking love for our neighbors, strangers, and enemies, not because we're not afraid, but because we've seen a beautiful vision of what love can do. And oh man, I wanted to share this message because increasingly, almost deafeningly, we have this constant drumbeat of a message in our society that people are too dangerous, that our neighbor is actually a stranger, is actually an enemy, that we need to do whatever we can to protect ourselves. And increasingly, that's becoming a Christian message. But what I see throughout the entire Bible is Jesus saying that his followers would be known not for their fear, but for their love.
Yes.
That again, multiple times in the Bible, God says that it will be through our love that people will know that we are disciples of Jesus. And I'm wondering, did we forget that? Did it seem too hard? We are increasingly known as people who are afraid, of people who are even calling for harm to other people in order that we can have our fears alleviated and feel safer. And that is just deeply concerning to me. And I really wanted to take a look at what Jesus actually had to say. And ideally, in a conversation like this, or every chapter or at least every section has some discussion questions and some reflection questions, some songs I suggest people might want to listen to, some
Yes.
artwork I think they might want to look at, because I don't think this is something we can do on our own, because the world is dangerous and we are afraid. But if the followers of Jesus came together and said, what if we lived lovingly in our communities? Like, what if we talked about what it was like to love our neighbors, to take care of strangers, even to love our enemies, then how could we be stopped?
Yeah.
There's so much that we could do. So I do want it to be a conversation. I hope people will read it in small groups or large groups. In the back of the book, it says, we have so many reasons to be afraid, yet Jesus says, do not fear. Everywhere we turn, we're bombarded by fear. The world we love can be unpredictable and chaotic, but Christ's followers are called to enter this world and love our neighbors, take care of strangers, love and pray even for our enemies. Jesus says his followers would be recognized not by our labels, but by a love that conquers fear. So I just wanted to explore that together.
Yes, I love that. And there was something that really stood out to me about the way that we identify ourselves as Christ followers versus how God wants us to. And can I read that on
Yeah.
Okay, let me get the book.
Please. Story time.
Oh, look, I have both of them. They were both of them
awesome.
together. Okay, so I wrote it in my notes. It was on page 29, and it just really, really stuck with me. So it says, we generally identify Christ followers by looking for the word Christian. But God says nothing about distinguishing us by our label. God says his children will be recognized by our love.
Yeah.
I was like, I reread that and then I posted and I was like, yes, this is so true and so powerful, because it is just like, I even had this moment where I didn't want to identify myself as a Christian. Like, I didn't want to say that I was a Christian, because there is sometimes there is this negative this stereotype or just this negative narrative around it. And it was like, I don't want to be associated with those Christians. I'm a different, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I had to wrestle with that a little bit. And I had a good friend of mine help me with that. So mostly what I say is that I'm a believer, or that I'm a Christ follower, more than just Christian, because I feel like we are more than just a word and a label. We really have to act out, right? That we are followers of Christ. So that was so powerful to me. And yeah, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's just a conviction that I hold so strongly. Again, like, we can put the word Christian on anything. Like, like, I'll go print out some stickers that say Christian. I'll put it on my Diet Pepsi. Like, it's still just a Diet Pepsi,
Yeah.
But I think it's become a shortcut for us where, well, if this radio show says it's Christian, then it is a representative of what God wants us to do. Or if this politician says that he's a Christian, then I should vote for him. And if this church has the word Christian on it, then I don't need to, really reflect on what I'm being told. But that's just marketing, like, we have been, I think, tricked by this sleight of hand with marketing. Jesus followers did not have the option of that. The word Christian did not even exist yet. Jesus said, he gave the Beatitudes, he gave the Sermon on the Mount. He said, take up your cross and follow me. He was living out acts of radical compassion and justice in a way that was disruptive to those who held power. And it became so dangerous that he was killed. He didn't do this because it was safe to do this or because he was benefiting in some way. he did this because he was representing God, and God says, "This is who I am." And so I think if we are Christians, we need to stop taking this shortcut of just listening to the marketing. We need to say, where am I actually seeing Jesus? Where am I seeing radical acts of compassion and sacrifice and justice, even if it is dangerous and costly for me? Because that's what Jesus says following him looks like.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I've mentioned it before in my writings and in my posts and even on my social media. Is like we have to be careful of who we follow that calls themselves Christian.
Yeah.
Because even I've noticed even like this Christian influencer thing is like going on right now on social media. And it's like, anybody can just grab their phone, record themselves on the live and, say a few Bible verse and call themselves a Christian and use that for money in a business model. And it's like, we really have to be discerning. We really have to be careful. Because like you said, it can be used as a marketing tactic.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So obviously my podcast is about immigration and we're talking about Christianity, but your book is not about immigration per se, right? It's not, you can't, right? So how does this apply to what's going on with immigration today?
Well, this book is not about immigration per se, but it is very much about immigration. I think if you lived in a place where there were no immigrants and you had no interest or knowledge about this conversation, I think you could read it and really appreciate it. But in my actual context, I live in a town that is significantly more than 50% recent immigrants. The kids, my kids go to school in a school that is about 80%. And my husband is the director of a social services organization, community-based social services organization, and many of his employees and customers and clients are pretty recent immigrants. So when I'm talking about my neighbors, a lot of them are immigrants. And when I talk about strangers, a lot of in the Bible, those are people who are traveling. When Jesus is talking about caring for strangers, those are people who are far from their home country for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so listening to the rhetoric that is going on in the United States today and for the past many years about immigrants is devastatingly dangerous and hateful. But again, it has become linked to the word Christian, to talk hatefully, neglectfully, to speak about immigrants as though they were unhuman or dangerous. So I think a lot of what I write about loving strangers is very clearly applicable to us in America today in the conversation about immigrants. And then some might say, no, but Catherine, I truly do believe that immigrants coming into our country are dangerous. Then you know what? I don't even need to argue with you about this, because if you believe immigrants are your enemy, which I don't believe at all, but if you do believe that, the answer is the same still. We have to love and sacrificially care even for our enemies. So I absolutely do, through starting in the place that my actual neighbors often are immigrants, and that most of my fellow Americans would like to consider immigrants to be strangers or enemies. A lot of where this ends up going does apply to the immigration conversation specifically.
Have you been thinking about starting your very own podcast? Well, I created a podcast course to help you launch your podcast without feeling overwhelmed and with simplicity. Okay. So it is a 6-week podcast course. Each video is less than 15 minutes long, so it doesn't take that much time to get through. And it breaks down the steps that you need to launch your podcast. Again, 6 weeks or less. So you can do it faster than 6 weeks, or you can take longer than 6 weeks. It's all up to you. You do it at your pace. And you will get lifetime access to this course. In addition to the 6 modules or the 6 videos, you also get videos about editing. You'll also get the podcast digital planner, which helps you create your content and helps you with the episode outline. It helps you with the show notes outline. It helps you stay on track with the podcast cycle checklist. It has the guest intake form and also a Google Sheet episode organizer to make sure that you are organized and set up from the jump to be able to plan out your content, organize your episodes, because that is key to long-term podcasting, right? You'll also get 3 exclusive interviews with leading podcasters who are killing it in the industry. And in addition to all of that, you will also get the podcast workbook, like how to launch a podcast workbook that goes along with each module. So you can watch the videos and then also follow along with the workbook. All of that is included in the course. If you are interested, head over to my Stan store. The link is in the show notes and the show description. So you can sign up for the course. And there's also a referral program included. If you refer someone to me to launch their podcast and they sign up for the course, I will give you $50. That's right. You will receive $50 if the person you referred does sign up for the podcast course. So all the information is in my Stan store. If you have any specific questions, you can always email me at Heidy@HeidyDelacruz.com and let's get your podcast launched. Yeah. And because of the negative narrative that we've been having these past few years. And I feel like it's been going on for, I don't know, I think since the beginning of time, but it's just been heightened these past few years. And it's just been so bad. And that is one of the reasons why I did start this podcast. And I say that the mission of the podcast is to change the narrative of immigration to a more compassionate and empathetic approach. And I say a Jesus approach because, you know, like you said, the Bible tells us many, many times, do not fear, do not fear, do not fear. And it just seems like that is what is being used to make people move a certain way. And so, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I started this, because it's like when we hear about immigration, we hear policies, we hear laws, we hear they're coming, we hear all these negative things, but we don't hear stories.
Right.
There's people and there's families that are attached to these policies, to these laws, to this rhetoric. And it's like, like you said, it's very hateful. It's so harmful. And words are powerful. What we say matters. And how we treat people matters. And how we think of our brothers and sisters matters, you know? And I just finished reading the book. I don't know if you saw the show Orange is the New Black, or
I didn't see it, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the actresses, Diane Guerrero, she wrote a book in 2016 about, it's called In the Country We Love, My Family Divided. And she actually shared her story about coming home at the age of 14 and her parents, both of them being deported.
Wow.
So she just comes into an empty house, you know, the biggest fear that she grew up with, but she knew her parents' status happened. So her parents were deported. She was 14 years old. And so she just had to navigate her life without her parents. And she was like, one of the things that really struck me was that no one in the government came to look for me to see if I was okay. Child Protective Service never came to check on me. No one, like no neighbors or anything. So she had to go with, you know, friends of the family and things like that. So I literally just finished this book, and, you know, towards the end, she gives a lot of facts and things like that. And again, she published this in 2016, and it's like, oh my God, we're in 2024 and here we are, you know?
Yeah.
But it was just such an important eye-opening story, because she did give statistics about like kids whose family do get deported and like what happens to them, you know, and things like that. So yeah, all of that to say is that these stories are important, which is why I share immigrant stories. And it's very important for us as Christians to listen to them and be compassionate and loving. So when would you say that you are in the immigration advocacy space?
That's a great question. I think yes and no. You know, I don't work as a immigration advocate, but I do try to do that with my words and with my actual life. Like I mentioned, my husband is a social worker, or the director of a social services organization, which is very much both run by and also run for immigrants in our community. And so
Mhm.
you're talking about story. I think if the question is, how did I get into this space? It's been through story because
Mm.
I've had the honor and the privilege of being proximal to so many people's stories. The volunteer work that I've done for this organization has been to, invite people over for coffee or invite myself over to their home for coffee, and so much hospitality, that we are so bad at, those of us who were born here. But I've been the recipient of wonderful hospitality and had an opportunity to listen to and occasionally write up um, for this organization people's stories. And I've also had an opportunity to be proximal to some of the facts and some of the data about immigration. And I have found just so vividly, Heidi, just so vividly, that the facts that emerge both from the data and from the real life stories has absolutely no relationship to what is being talked about online or on cable television or even, God help us, from the pulpits and
Yeah.
Christian radio and what have you. The reality of the real people's stories and of the data is just so desperately different from the the lies
Yeah.
and the propaganda that we are
Yeah.
being told. And so that is where so much of my passion comes from, because if I am told over and over and over again that someone is going to come to my front door and ring the doorbell and they want to kill me, two things are going to happen. A Girl Scout is going to come trying to sell cookies to me, and I'm going to probably put her in danger, or my
Mm.
DoorDash delivery person is going to come. Innocent people trying to serve me, trying to be friends with me, trying to be neighborly. I'm in danger of endangering them because I've been told they're coming to harm me. But meanwhile, I'm not paying any attention to my back door. So any number of robbers or whatever can sneak into my house because I've been tricked to only watch my front door. And
Mm.
I feel like that's happening to those of us who are in dominant culture America. We have been told to really be, afraid of immigrants. And so as a result, we are harming our neighbors because we view them as dangerous, but literally they are neighbors. They are human men and women and children that we could benefit so much from getting to know. And they
Yeah.
could benefit so much from a relationship of mutuality, not us giving charity, but us receiving and us giving, like neighbors do. And in the meantime, those people on the radio, in the pulpit, on the television, on the internet have exploited our fears so that we don't actually see where the real dangers are lying. And maybe I'm getting too passionate now.
No, no, no,
But,
you're fine. I love this. I
um,
love this
that
conversation.
is how I got into this conversation.
Yes. No, I love it. And honestly, we need people like you passionate about this and passionate of no, don't fear our neighbors. They're literally here for a better life.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like we always hear they're coming, but people don't stop to think why?
Why?
What is going on in their country that has led these people to make such a desperate choice? Because
Yes.
no one wants
No,
to leave their home
no
country.
one.
They
No
don't
one
want to
wants to.
leave their family. They don't want to leave their culture, their food, their language. I mean, there's people who literally will either send their kids because they feel like it's a better option, or they'll leave their kids
Hmm.
behind so they can work here in the United States and then send money back to their children, or the whole family will
Yeah.
risk their lives. Like there's just so many different things, but it's like when we hear that there's like a huge number of migrants coming from a certain country, it's like, okay, stop and think, like, wait, hold on, what is going on
Yeah.
in their home
Yeah.
country that's driving all these people here and things
Right.
like that. That's one of the things that people don't stop to think about. So bringing up people coming and
Yeah.
things like that. So you co-wrote Start with Welcome.
Yes.
And
Yep.
I had Bree Stansterd on the podcast last year. She is the
Yeah.
director of Women of Welcome, which is an amazing organization that is providing facts and real data on immigration and
Mm-hmm.
what's
Mm-hmm.
actually happening. And they provide a lot of resources. They do the trips to the border.
Yep. Yep.
I've seen her and a few women from the group go to Congress to go advocate for immigration.
Yes.
So they're doing a lot of good work. So how
Yeah.
did this come about?
Well, that it's actually kind of a funny story. After my book, Fearing Bravely, Risking Love for Your Neighbors, Strangers, and Enemies came out, there was a particular day. I guess Bree had been kind of in the process talking to agents and editors and publishers about this. And there was a particular day. I did not know Bree at the time. She and I did not know each other. I did not know of Women of Welcome either. And two different people came up to Bree, if I'm remembering correctly, and said, "Do you know who you need to get involved in this book is Catherine McNeil?" Because they had just read Fearing Bravely. And that same day, two people called me to say, from inside the industry, agent, editor type thing, to say, Bree from Women of Welcome is looking to write a book. I think you would be the perfect person to collaborate with her on this. So we had heard about each other from different people, and they were not even the same people. And so then when somehow we all got connected, and then yeah, I was extremely pleased to partner with her on that book.
Yeah.
And to be clear, it is her book. If you look at the front cover, her name's on the front cover, and then my name is on the title page. A few pages in, it says
Yeah.
Bree with
Yeah.
Catherine. Yeah.
That's
So
Catherine. Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome. But look at God. Look at how God
yeah,
works though. Like two different people, different times, but then you guys are able to
yeah.
go on this. And why do you think the message with Start with Welcome is important?
Yeah, well, we talked earlier about the rhetoric that we're constantly bombarded with and how different that is from the actual facts. Just honestly, just a few days ago, a friend of mine read something that I had written on social media and sent me a text, and I'm so grateful that they did. They said, "Catherine, I understand your Christian heart, but what about the rising level of crime in communities where immigrants are being moved
Mm,
to, or and all of these other things?" And I said, "I'm so glad you asked. Like, let me give you actual data." And I was
yeah.
able to send her the actual studies that say that of all groups of people in the United States, immigrants are the least likely to be involved in violent crime.
Yes.
Of all communities in the United States, those that have an influx of immigrants are typically the safest communities to be living in or to be raising children in. And so I was able to, in a friendly way, just kind of introduce her to reality rather than rhetoric.
Yeah.
And I think that is the strength of Start with Welcome, is that it assumes that the person reading it wants to do the right thing, um, is a compassionate person, but is just genuinely disoriented by all of the messages that they're getting. And so the tone is very readable, very accessible. It's not assuming that you, like are an advocate or a lawyer or
Yeah.
anything. Um, and then we just slowly unpack, what does the Bible actually say about travelers, sojourners, immigrants? What does our laws actually, what are our laws?
Yes. Yeah.
What what do people who want the laws to be changed, what do they recommend? What have our politicians actually done or said in the past? Where are the immigrants coming from and why? And then again, there's so much stories.
Yeah.
It's allowing us to actually set aside that rhetoric and spend some time listening to the reality of what immigration looks like for real people. And yeah, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And thinking about our policies and laws, like our immigration system is so complex. Like
Yeah.
people think that it's so simple, like, oh, get in line. And it's like there's no line, guys. There's no
Right? There's no
line.
line. Hmm.
And yeah, there's just so much complexity to it. And and the backlog right now that is going on, and that's what's actually led people to their desperate measures of showing up in the southern border because of the backlog that we have, because we don't have the manpower to handle all the pending process applications that are there right now. And that's just things that that we look into it deeper, but the majority of people don't look into it deeper. And then you mentioning the immigrants or the cities where immigrants are at has like the lower crime rate, or that they actually do the least amount of crimes. It reminds me of, I was with a friend of mine who's in a process of seeking asylum, right? And she was driving, and I was like, why is she driving so slow? I'm a speed driver, so like I'll go over the speed limit. I'm just like, this woman is really driving the speed, like why? But then it clicked, like she can't get in trouble with the law.
Right.
She can't bring attention to her and her family because they're literally still in the middle of the process of seeking asylum. So that's just like something that like I don't have to think about. If I get caught, I get a speeding ticket. Right. But for them, it's a much bigger deal. So it's like little things like that they are very aware of and very conscious of, like, no, gotta go to speed limit, don't bring attention to yourself, gotta do things right. And things like that. So just
And if you've gone to so much effort and expense and sacrifice and risk to provide for your family, you're not going to throw it all away. You're going to do whatever you can to make sure they have food, education, clothes, and a chance.
So like you said, so much money, because that's another thing. Like, getting a good attorney is a privilege because it's expensive, and the fees for the applications and it's a lot. So Catherine, thank you so much for this very insightful conversation. Thank you for these books. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And the very last question that I love to ask my guests to wrap up the conversation is, what does the American dream mean to you?
Wow, that's such a great question. I was just actually thinking the other day, I was watching my high schoolers at a football game, and like I've already said, we live in a very diverse community, and I was thinking about how a culture's values, we're going to keep raising the bar because we care about it, and so we're always going to see how far we have to go, like how much we're falling short. And so I'm going to be so like discouraged at how little equality we have, how little access to resources we have as for everyone, how little justice. But in America, we are striving for it. Like in America, I can say that that's something I want to fight for. So I think for me, the American dream at its best is an incredibly diverse group of people from all over the world, genuinely seeking their own flourishing and others flourishing together. And that is a beautiful vision that we have not achieved, but I just pray we keep on shooting for it, and maybe we'll get a little closer.
I love that you mentioning diversity. It just reminds me of the Summer Olympics, and when they would show like the pictures of like the USA teams, like just a diversity, and it's like, man, that is so beautiful, because like there's you will look at the other teams and it's like they, not that they look the same, but it's like it's just so different from the US, and so beautiful to see.
Agreed.
Thank you, Catherine,
so
much
Heidi.
For this. And if people want to get in contact with you, or they want to follow you, where can they follow you? And then where can they actually get these books?
Oh, wonderful questions. Well, my full name is Catherine McNeil, and you have to spell both of those names correctly. But if you do, that's my website. It's catherinemcneil.com. My handle on pretty much all social media is at Catherine McNeil, and you will find links to my books on my website or on my social media, but they're on Amazon and anywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Perfect. And of course, I will include your links in the show notes and the show description so people can have that. And again, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Heidi. It's been an honor.
Thank you for listening to Mommy Podcast.